Texas Democrats have fled the state to block a Republican bill that overhauls elections. Governor Greg Abbott says when they return to the state, they will be arrested for disrupting the legislative process. The White House is working with Senate Democrats on a multi-trillion-dollar spending package. The plan would significantly expand and reshape federal spending. And as fall approaches, lots of questions around vaccine and mask mandates. States are weighing in with different takes. Tune in to Deep Dive as we explore these topics and more. Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive and I'm Tiffany Meier. Let's kick off with the Lone Star State. Tensions are high after Democratic lawmakers staged a walkout on Monday to deny the state legislature quorum. That way, the majority GOP won't be able to pass voting reform. Democrats didn't just walk out, they booked it all the way to D.C. on chartered planes. That's to urge moderate Democrats to oppose the filibuster. That's so Democrats at the federal level can pursue their election agenda without Republican support. Texas Governor Greg Abbott is vowing there will be consequences when they return. He says the Democrats' decision is inflicting harm on the Texans who elected them. And he says they will be arrested when they return. He claims other members of the House can call for the Democrats who ditched the vote to be arrested. But one fired back, saying it's an empty threat. Representative Jasmine Crockett tells CNN, "I don't worry. I understand that I've not committed a crime, so I can't get arrested." Adding at most, Abbott can have them detained but not arrested. Abbott called a special session to pass an election overhaul bill. Republicans say it's necessary to prevent irregularities and fraud, but Democrats say it amounts to voter suppression. A state representative who's been there for 6 sessions says hundreds of bills that address fraud, ballot harvesting, and absentee voting are filed every session.
So these bills are filed every session on these issues, and I really don't see any difference in what we're doing this session.
Abbott told Fox News the measure makes it easier to vote by adding more hours to early voting, but he says it makes it harder to cheat using mail-in ballots. The Texas Tribune notes when the House convenes Tuesday, if there is no quorum, any House member can make a call for a quorum to consider a bill, resolution, or motion. That's according to the House rules. The motion then has to be supported by 15 members and ordered via a majority vote. If the motion is supported, the missing Democrats will then become essentially fugitives. And on Tuesday, House Democrats voted 76-4 to arrest the Democrat lawmakers who staged the walkout Monday. Quote, under warrant of arrest if necessary. The Wall Street Journal notes the state House vote came as the Texas Senate was preparing to consider its own version of the elections bill. And while the events in Texas continue to unfold, let's turn to the nation's capital. Senator Bernie Sanders met with President Joe Biden to talk about an infrastructure bill on Monday. Democrats are putting together their own bill in addition to the bipartisan one that's being negotiated in the Senate. That bill includes the Democrats' social spending priorities. Sanders is chairman of the Senate Budget Committee. He says the bill is a way for the government to help working families.
And we want to see a reconciliation bill which shows the working families of this country the government can and must work for them.
Democrats are negotiating a bill among themselves now that Senator Joe Manchin says he supports a bill that leaves out Republicans. Sanders initially proposed a $6 trillion package. Biden's proposal comes in at $3.5 trillion. Manchin or any moderate Democrat can reduce the size of the bill if they don't support it. Every Democrat will have to vote for it to get it through the evenly divided Senate. Republicans say the additional spending is not on infrastructure, but social programs and Green New Deal proposals. The Democrats' plan is expected to include tax increases, spending on climate change, education, caregiving, and other social programs. David Ditch is a policy analyst on the federal budget for the Heritage Foundation. He says the Biden administration is promoting its American Jobs Plan as an infrastructure proposal. In reality, it's a gargantuan tax and spend package that would expand federal power and control in a wide variety of areas. He says the plan won't create jobs because it will simply move private construction jobs to the public sector, where projects are more expensive. Sanders says they are trying to accomplish something very significant, and he hopes to pass the bill as soon as possible. Initial votes on the package are expected later this month. And now many parents are wondering if their kids will have to show proof of COVID vaccination to attend school in the fall. For many states, that answer is no. At least 7 states have enacted legislation that specifically forbids public schools from requiring vaccinations. Most states have introduced general legislation that limits requiring people to demonstrate vaccination status. In many instances, if those laws pass, they will likely apply to schools as well. The different approaches taken by states is leaving many parents with questions. For example, in most cases where vaccinations cannot be required, vaccines for diseases like measles and polio are still mandated. And Centers for Disease Control is not taking a solid stance on vaccine requirements in schools. The agency only urges schools to promote vaccination. The CDC did update its guidelines, saying schools should reopen in the fall and gave different mask requirements for those who are vaccinated or not. The CDC says masks are not needed for vaccinated students and teachers, but still recommended for unvaccinated ones. And for the unvaccinated ones, the CDC is also calling for once-a-week voluntary routine virus testing and 3 feet social distancing recommended. That's down from the original 6 feet. Masks are still required for everyone on school buses. And because vaccines are not approved for children aged 12 and younger, the CDC guideline seems to say that all children 2 to 12 should be wearing masks. It says there should be layers of protection, including testing, ventilation, contact tracing, and sanitation measures when not masked or a 3 feet distance can't be kept in schools. So that's what the CDC is saying, but some states have their own ideas. California is taking a hardline stance, saying K-12 students who don't wear masks will not be allowed to set foot on campus. That's regardless of vaccination status. That's according to new state guidelines. The California Department of Public Health tweeted California school guidance will be clarified regarding masking enforcement, recognizing local schools' experience in keeping students and educators safe while ensuring schools fully reopen for in-person instruction. The updated guidelines say schools must develop and implement local protocols to enforce the mask requirements. Some call it a win, with California Health and Human Services Agency Secretary saying on Friday that the mask mandate was put in place not only to reduce the risk of children contracting the virus, but also to avoid unvaccinated students feeling singled out. And over on the opposite coast, New York City's Mayor Bill de Blasio is requiring masks for elementary school students. He says, "I am absolutely confident, based on this guidance and everything else we've seen, that we'll be able to get all our kids back into school in September. But for now, sticking with the idea that wearing the masks is a smart thing to do in schools. We'll keep assessing as we go along." De Blasio announced back in May the city's public schools would fully reopen for in-person learning in September. Now, while states figure out vaccine and mask requirements, the Biden administration's education department is doubling tuition breaks for future teachers, removing GPA requirements for grant recipients. Education Secretary Miguel Cardona announced that the annual grant amount for juniors, seniors, and graduate students will double from $4,000 to $8,000 per recipient. And GPA requirements have been removed. The administration says this is to increase access for students of color. Quote, "The proposed plan also aims to increase the access that students from low-income backgrounds and students of color have to have comprehensive teacher preparation." They expect these changes to increase the number of recipients by more than 50% to nearly 40,000 in 2022. And what about student loan debt? The Education Department is canceling $55.6 million in student loan debt for 1,800 former students who attended 3 institutions that the Department of Education found had defrauded them: Westwood College, Maranello Schools of Beauty, and the Court Reporting Institute. The latest round of student loan debt relief brings the Biden administration's total loan cancellation, based on borrow defense, to more than $1.5 billion for nearly 92,000 borrowers. Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona says today's announcement continues the U.S. Department of Education's commitment to standing up for students whose colleges took advantage of them. The department will continue doing its part to review and approve borrower defense claims quickly and fairly so that borrowers receive the relief that they need and deserve. We also hope these approvals serve as a warning to any institution engaging in similar conduct that this type of misrepresentation is unacceptable. The Education Department found that Westwood College, Maranello Schools of Beauty, and Court Reporting Institute all made, quote, widespread, substantial misrepresentations to students. All three schools are now closed. But what do you think? Let me know below. Thanks for tuning into Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.